Iran's deputy foreign minister has hit out at Israel and the United States for what he is calling a grave violation of the ceasefire deal. Saeed Khatibzadeh told the BBC that Israel's continued attacks in Lebanon are a massacre and that a clear message had been sent to Washington that they were not compliant with the agreement. Lebanon's health ministry says now at least 203 people were killed on Wednesday and more than 1,000 wounded in the heaviest wave of attacks since hostilities against the Iran-backed group Hezbollah resumed last month. And meanwhile, the US Vice President J.D. Vance, he is repeating Washington's stance that Lebanon was never included in the ceasefire. And in the last few hours, President Trump has been posting, and he said all US ships, aircraft and military personnel will remain in place in and around Iran until real agreement is reached and is fully complied with. He also added that the Straits of Hormuz should be open and safe, but that it is currently in doubt, with Iran giving conflicting signals about whether ships can resume passing through. So back to that interview with Iran's deputy foreign minister speaking to the BBC, saying his country will provide security for safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz, but only after the US actually ends its aggression. He's been speaking to my colleague Nick Robinson on the BBC Radio 4 Today programme.
It was a grave violation, intentional grave violation of the ceasefire. You cannot have a cake and eat it at the same time. That was the message that Iran sent quite clearly, crystal clearly to Washington and to the Oval Office last night. And our foreign minister also said that you cannot ask for a ceasefire and then accept terms and conditions, accept the areas that ceasefire is applied to, and name Lebanon, exactly Lebanon in that. And then your ally just start a massacre. Actually, it was a sort of genocide, by the regime of Israel in Lebanon, just immediately after the ceasefire was accepted. It is a type of, practice that Israeli regime has always done, accepting ceasefire, then surprise attack, massacring, and that was a very bold message that we sent last night to Washington.
Well, the message said, just to spell it out if you could, the message said the United States must choose. What must they choose?
Between war and ceasefire. They cannot have it both at the same time. They are exclusively, mutually exclusive. It is quite clear. And if President Trump, as he tweeted, is interested in peace for the whole Middle East, and since Iran is committed to that, we ask everybody in the Middle East to be abided by this agreement that and this ceasefire that we reached to with Americans, and we expect the Americans do the same with its ally, the Israeli regime. But what happened yesterday was grave violation, and everybody was watched. I'm sure that you are aware that Foreign Minister of Belgium was in Beirut, few hundred meters from this massacre, and he just tweeted that it was a surprise attack, and we were not, informed. We were not, actually detailed about that before the attack, and it was a catastrophe. It could actually end in more catastrophe, and this is the nature of this rogue behavior that we are seeing from Israel in the whole Middle East.
Will you tell Iran's allies, Hezbollah, who get their weapons, training and support from Iran, to stop firing rockets into Israel?
I think that it is quite clear that Hezbollah is pure Lebanese freedom movement.
Are you denying that there are Iranian officers, members of the IRGC, advising, training, arming Hezbollah, because the rest of the world believes that to be true?
Look, I'm not denying that, and I believe that the rest of the world has no actually saying in BBC. Let me tell you something. I'm not denying anything. I'm not shy to say that it provides support to this freedom movement and resistance movement. I'm telling you that they are not. This is not true that they are acting on behalf of us.
So while this fragile ceasefire between the US and Iran is actually holding for now, there's this massive disagreement over whether Lebanon is included in the agreement. On Wednesday, we saw a barrage of IDF missiles fired across Lebanon. This was the heaviest bombardment of the conflict so far. Israel saying it launched 100 airstrikes in just 10 minutes. The Israeli military also saying it was aiming for Hezbollah targets, but many of these airstrikes hit densely populated residential areas where there is a high risk of civilian casualties. And you can see live pictures coming to us now from Beirut, absolutely devastating. Some of the scenes in Beirut today, people continuing to dig through the rubble as well. The Lebanese government announcing it would be a public holiday today, that they needed a day to mourn all of those who have been killed. And there are new figures coming to us actually from the government, just saying over 200 people were killed and 1,000 injured in those strikes yesterday. Well, overnight, Hezbollah says it fired rockets at northern Israel. It says in response to ceasefire violations. They've also threatened to continue attacks until Israeli-American aggression, as they call it, against Lebanon has stopped. Let's bring you more now with our Middle East correspondent, Lina Sinjab. She's in Beirut.
It's fair to say that this is a country in trauma. There's a collective shock that the Lebanese have lived, even if they were not directly affected by the strikes, even if they survived these strikes. Many people are looking for family members, friends who've been affected by this. The scale is huge, and the images speak for themselves. The numbers are, the government says almost 200 people died, and that number is likely to rise because there are hundreds more are in hospital. Hospitals are drained. Yesterday there were calls for, aid for doctors to volunteers, for nurses, for blood donation. It's a chaotic, catastrophic scene that, controlled the situation all over Lebanon yesterday. But it did not stop at the strikes that happened within 10 minutes. It continued throughout the day and after midnight as well. So Israel seems to be determined in its mission to attack Hezbollah. They say these strikes are targeted against Hezbollah. Today we've heard an announcement that one member, the secretary of the General Secretary, Naim Qassem, his assistant has been assassinated in those strikes. But look at the scale, look at the number of civilians, the children, the families split apart, the pictures of buildings destroyed and families are still hanging, not knowing what to do in half an apartment after half of their apartments was destroyed. And the search is ongoing for possibly survivors under rubble. So it's really a terrible situation for the country, and the Lebanese feel that they're left alone to face this war without anyone able to stop it.
That's the picture in Lebanon today, particularly in Beirut. I've been speaking to Dr. Sultan Barakat. He joined me here in Doha. He's a professor at the College of Public Policy at Hamad bin Khalifa University.
When Netanyahu chosen to attack Lebanon, he said publicly this is because of the war with Iran. And he went on attacking Hezbollah, and they've had that bombing and so on. So if that is already included in your war against Iran, then the ceasefire should also include Lebanon. Now that's if you think that maybe they misread whatever they agreed on in writing, and maybe there's been miscommunication because of the nature of the mediation that took place. It wasn't face-to-face, they were passing messages to each other and so on. Then still, I think Israel should have stopped. But the problem, I think, in this region, we have got to understand that Netanyahu is always very determined to get his way. And he doesn't mind, even if the U.S. pays the price for anything. We had the same episode, if you remember, back on the 24th of June last year, when even after the U.S. had reached an agreement with Iran, he decided to send out his bombers. And Trump then had to order him to send them back. So there is a pattern there where Netanyahu is probably unlikely to listen to.
But arriving here in Doha yesterday, there was a sense of relief that the ceasefire had been agreed. And now today, it seems the fragility of it has already been exposed.
Absolutely. I mean, we went to bed thinking, yes, things are heading in the right direction. But this shows that there is very little good faith, really, in underpinning these talks. And also, it doesn't help the statements that came out from Trump recently. To talk about the forces are just resting and reloading means that you did not really engage in a ceasefire in the hope that you reach an end to this war. You are still using this again for the third time as a possibility to reload and launch even stronger attacks on Iran. Now, of course, the Iranians may be using it the same way because they've suffered a lot But I think for the Americans, it must have been extremely difficult to continue attacking Iran from the sea the way they've been doing for a continuous 6 weeks plus.